This may be controversial, but your child's not as good as you actually think they are. And I can explain why. So there are roughly 7 million youth soccer players, boys and girls, playing the sport in the United States. But I'm going to present you some numbers that should probably shock you to the core a little bit. Because while your child might be a good player and they might play in a certain league, but there are better players in other situations. And I'm going to show you how and why here in a moment. So simple. If there's 7 million players, 1% of 7 million, okay, is 70,000 players. 70,000. 1% of 7 million is 70,000. And that's an interesting dynamic for us to start thinking about. Okay, so the percentage to be in the 1% is the top 70,000 players. Okay, now how many of those 70,000 players are going to move on to the next level? And that number is going to get even smaller because the professional game is very few and far between. You're talking maybe 5 to 10 kids a year get to go professionally per year. Okay? Then you look at college programs. There's only a certain number of college programs, but a lot of them are recruiting internationally. They're not recruiting domestic players. They're recruiting outside of the United States. Now, that's not every program, but a lot are doing this. So if that's the case, and I'll use a hometown example. I live in Orlando. UCF is 30 minutes from my home. The entire starting 11 of UCF is international players. So it's going to be a challenge for American players. But let's continue with the numbers aspect here. So roughly 7 million players, boys and girls. 1% of 7 million is 70,000. Okay? From the math that I did, there are 753 MLS Next teams. So this is boys. Let's say an average of 20 players. That's 15,000 players in MLS Next. Okay? Let's now add ECNL. So boys and girls, there's 1,395 ECNL teams with an average of, say, 18 players. That's 25,110 boys and girls playing ECNL soccer per year. Okay, let's look at GA teams. There's 575 GA teams, which is girls only, with an average of 18 players. That's 10,350 girls. So if you total all this up, that is a total of 50,520 top players. Well, these are supposed to be our best leagues. Now, the number could be up or down, but let's give it a couple thousand. So let's say up or down, let's even add 10. Let's say it's a 10,000 player swing. And that could be up to 60,000. That's still less than the 1%. And then you got to factor in things like kids that are playing like UPSL. So I have one player that used to play for me for a number of years. His name is Isa. He's a 2010 who's in 2025. So he's, I think, 15 years old playing UPSL. All right, so you have some players in that category. And then you have some players that are, say, Kevon Sullivan playing in MLS Next. I'm sorry, playing MLS, not MLS Next. So you can kind of see how 1% is very small. And then you factor in getting to the next level from that point does not get easier. It's only going to get more challenging. But like I gave you this example of Isa, 15-year-old playing adult competition UPSL. Well, who's going to be more prepared for the next level? A kid that plays his age group or a kid that's playing against adult competition? And if you don't want to believe it from that aspect, let me give you a different idea. Kevon Sullivan, the big-time American player that just signed for Manchester City when he turns 18 years old. He is a 14-year-old playing MLS Next Pro. And he's even made his debut in MLS at 14 years old. Maybe he's 15 at this point. Not sure. But let's just say at 14 years old, already playing against adult competition. Why would they do that? Because he's good enough. They think he has the talent. They think he has the ability. They pushed him to the next step. If the player is good enough, they got to be pushed because doing what the average does, and I just gave you these numbers, doing what the average does is not going to get you to the next step. It's not going to get your child to the next step. That's why I truly recommend thinking outside the box. Think bigger picture. Because sure, your child can play their age group and play on a U15 MLS Next team. Sure, your daughter could play ECNL, play her age group. Sure, your daughter could play GA, play her age group. But remember, if we're thinking bigger picture, the end goal isn't this league. The end goal is college or professional or being prepared for life. And this should be the key thing, regardless if they go to college or pro, being prepared for life. And if that's going to be the main theme here, then them playing their age group restricts their ability to potentially get to the next level because they don't stand out. If you're a 15-year-old and you can dominate a field against grown men, you don't think you're going to get attention? There's a lot of things for, I think, people to think about when it comes to navigating the USU soccer path. Sure, you could go what everybody else does, but if you follow what everybody else does that build success? Did Sullivan follow what everybody else did? Doesn't look like it, and that's why he's at a certain point in his life playing at a certain level. So those are things that I think really need to be considered for parents and players, is if my end goal is to get, say, to UCF, where am I going to best do that? You ain't going to do it in America. You better go to Spain. You better go to Brazil. You better go to France. Just one example for you. But that's kind of the theme and idea here. Can we think as a country? Let's start individually. Can we think individually? Can we think bigger picture and then translate that as a country?